Majority of votes in favour of the proposal, 467,307.
It's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
Good afternoon and welcome to Dublin City FM. You're listening to LGBTlife with myself, Mick FitzGerald, and today we've got a very special programme for you. We've got an anniversary special, what I'm calling 1 year on from marriage equality. And to discuss this in the studio with me, I've got a very select panel. Joining me on our left over there will be Emma Murphy, who is a councillor with Fianna Fáil out there on South Dublin Council, and she represents Rathfarnham. Good afternoon, Emma. Yeah, and also joining me is what I'm calling the ever youthful looking Ms. Louise Hannon, formerly of the Labour Party, and I think these days of the Soc Dems, are you?
Yes,
Louise?
very much social Dems, yeah.
Yeah, and we may be joined in the studio later on by Max Kryzanowski himself. But I'm going to start off with yourself, Emma, not on gender, but on perhaps the way culturally this works. You probably went through the entire, what I call, Bride of Christ experience, because I was down in Abbey Street the other day and there was these little girls and they were about 8 years of age, and they were beautiful, you know, in the sense they were in white and they were all made up and everything, and they were doing their communion. And I suspect you went through that. Now, at 8 years of age, you probably think this is natural, this is what you do, and it's possibly even a dress rehearsal for the big day later on. When you got to be a bit more mature in your teens, and then later on as a mature woman, how did you see that? I mean, did you think by the time you got to maybe 15, well, maybe I'm not quite as, you know, the white dress and the walking down the aisle, or what was your whole approach to it? Because culturally it's very ingrained in Ireland, the whole concept of marriage.
Well, I suppose the differential between communion and marriage, I'd hope that it still exists, you know. I mean, I was a reluctant 6-year-old getting into a dress. I probably prefer the football boots and the shorts now, rather than to be running around in a pair of jeans than the dress. But I mean, from a cultural perspective, you know, marriage is, you know, we now have equal marriage, you know, and what we've had to look at what marriage actually means over the last couple of years, and it's probably a good examination for us culturally as an Irish population. Really, I really would like to make sure that the differential between between making your first communion and marriage are two that remain distinctly separate as well.
Louise, you would have been denied that communion experience in yourself. Do you feel there's a deficit in your life as a result of it?
No, actually, I'm quite glad, Mick. I mean, I see them all the time and I go, why? You know, why are you putting your kids through this? I mean, it's like a birthday party and you're getting loads and loads of presents and everybody loves you, which they do anyway, and it's great fun. But, I mean, what does it actually mean? I don't see it meaning a lot, to be honest.
But it's powerfully symbolic, though, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah. It's very symbolic. But, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do in terms of religion over the years has been symbolic and is symbolic. And I think that's why people are still attached to the religious side of things.
I think the boys are better dressed than the girls sometimes. I saw a couple of morning coats now in my estate now on Saturday, long morning coats, and the hairs are definitely better.
Are the boys getting the full tan? I
don't know. I hope not. But you know, it is. I mean, it's a first communion. It's a day out. It's a celebration. It's you know, it's becoming huge for families. But I would hope that it doesn't, you know, link in any way to kind of the marriage component, that it is a religious ceremony that's the beginning of children's, you know, life, and, you know, within a religious circle as well. So that's what it's supposed to say.
Can we look back? It was 12 months ago, yes, to the 23rd, that we counted the votes and we actually acknowledged marriage equality. But when I was looking back at this, it struck me that there were two actual words there: marriage and equality. And I wonder, did we vote as much for marriage, perhaps, as we did for equality? Emma?
It's probably 50-50. You know, that would be mine. It would be both. You know, there is an equality. There is an equality component there, but there's also, it's recognition that you actually have something to make you equal rather than something that is, you know, that is distinctly separate as well. So I think that's why even the merging of the two words, when you look at how marriage equality was spelt, you know, the E at the end of marriage was taken in the start of equality as well. So it was a bit of both, I think.
What about yourself, Louise? Because if we go through the gamut, the L, the G, the B, and the T, and even the Q, the B and the Q never really they were never discriminated against per se in marriage. The L's, the G's, and the T's most certainly were. So I'm just wondering, did we vote on a human rights issue as opposed to what Emma was perhaps suggesting was a civic issue in itself? In other words, that there was a macro issue there.
Well, I mean, if you go back to 2007, when the NGLF, as they were at the time, decided to have a conference, Alva Smith ran a conference to find out how we could move equality for LGBT people forward. And at that time, marriage and equality were never connected. And it was only at the stage where NOISE came into being and when the Marriage Equality Organisation came into being that actually the two were put together. And nobody at that point, I mean, I can remember the first NOISE rally, the second NOISE rally, and it was very, very small. And it was only the gay population, the LGBT population just actually weren't getting it. And all of a sudden, Rory O'Neill, aka Panty, came out and actually said, made a speech. And the following demonstration, there was a couple of thousand at it, and it just grew from there. I mean, at that particular one, I think there was 120 or something, because I remember standing with a placard at the front of the Gaiety Theatre. So people in the LGBT community didn't actually put the two together. So I think now we're probably looking at everybody knowing what equality is and probably raising the equality barrier, if you like, and actually make it much more of a banner, maybe make it much more of an issue.
What was your experience growing up, Emma? Because clearly there were different degrees of equality, there were different focuses of inequality, there were different, as I say, manifestations of it. To a certain degree, LGBT women, you could argue, were not legally discriminated against as much as men, but possibly culturally more so. How did you see this growing up?
I suppose for me it was never really a personal issue. You know, people always ask for your coming out stories all the time. I don't have one. I grew up in a household that was, you know, I'm the oldest of 6, so there's many other different things going on in the house rather than my sexuality. So, you know, I mean, it was one of those things where it was, you know, we've an open doors, and you know, you are who you are and you be who you be. So I think it's how you actually present yourself as well, and how you actually find it for yourself. I think I probably have thought about it more in the last 18 months than I have, you know, in the previous 18 years. You know, and I think that's down to, you know, we're now talking more about LGBT rights. We're now talking about more about what it means to be you know, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender in Ireland at the moment, and that's, you know, it's part of the movement that's happened, and it's only the beginning of a movement as well.
Can I then just put something slightly more personal to you in the sense that, were you expected, growing up, did your parents expect you that this would be, oh, Emma's going to provide us with a lovely day out and perhaps grandchildren?
My mum told me recently, which I was surprised at, she said, I always knew you were gay. And I was like, really? Well, you could have told me. You know, I suppose I only kind of came out when I was 22, 23, and that's what I said. I did say to her, you know, you could have told me, and you know, might have made my teenage years an awful lot easier. But you know, it was something that your own kind of personal journey then as well. So no, I don't come from the kind of 2.4 children family where you have to rush up the aisle. So I think you're allowed to be who you want to be, and you know, we're lots of different shapes and sizes and colours, so that's okay in our house.
We welcome Max Kryzanowski. Max, welcome to LGBT Life. Max, I was thinking about yourself earlier, It's all right, in a good way. And I suspect you grew up in one of those enlightened families that nobody actually expected that, oh, Max is going to provide us. It'd be nice if he did, but Max is necessarily going to provide us with the wife and the grandkids and we'll all have the day out. Or am I being a bit presumptuous there?
I suppose, like yourself, slightly more textured. I mean, my mother is a bit of a radical. She was in Divorce Action Group in the 80s, which was not at all a mainstream sort of pursuit for a mother. But I was mostly raised in a single-parent household. My parents got divorced when I was quite young. I was about 12. And certainly my father didn't have any expectations that he sent in our direction, but you can't help but be infected by the subtext of what society says. I mean, there is a life sort of plan, and there are stages that you go through school, and then either college or finding a job, and then you have supposed to have a girlfriend and go through the romantic steps, and then settle down and have a family. And it was very painful for me, even though there wasn't pressure coming from my family. It was very painful for me that this was instilled in me as objectives that I should be fulfilling, and it became apparent during my teenage years that these were receding possibilities, and then they became the idea that I was going to either have to live a lie to satisfy these criteria, or I was going to have to bite the bullet and declare myself to be a criminal, which is what I was at the time, because that was the case until 1993, which was coincidentally at the same age as yourself, the age that I came out, 22, 23. And it wasn't an accident that my coming out coincided with the decriminalisation. So you do internalise these societal goals, and I've heard it from an awful lot of other gay men that they go through this bereavement almost phase where they understand that their desire to be a parent is never going to be satisfied, that the idea of finding somebody to share their life with was never going to be a realistic goal, certainly not in Ireland. It was interesting, I was at the NXF Road to Equality exhibition, and Tony Walsh spoke about it, and he talked about something. He made a connection between two things that I've never heard made a connection before. He talked about the Celtic tiger and its takeoff coinciding with the decriminalisation of homosexuality, and he thinks there may be partially causal relationship there, because all of these young people who were driven out of the country, who should have been the economic future of the country, now felt that they might be able to have a future in the country. Now, I know this is the case for me, that I went through that bereavement and had to make all these internal adjustments, and I found coming out, even though I didn't suffer persecution as a result, I did find it extremely painful, because it was almost like telling everybody, I'm sorry, I've been a liar. I've been a liar for all of this time, and I felt deeply ashamed, on top of the shame of being different. So coming out need not be painful because of negative
Stereotypes.
Negative responses from people in your life. It can be, you can have internally generated shame and problems and isolation and things because of the reference points you have about what a good person is and what constitutes a good life doesn't seem available to you.
Yeah. Louise, I'm going to ask you the very personal question then. I mean, when you got married, because I can, the reason why I got married is quite bizarre. I won't go into it here. But when you got married, was there ever any issue at the time that this is the way forward? This is the path that we're all expected to follow, or did you think, hold on, I won't even ask that question. I'll just go along with it?
It was a question I never was asked. I never even thought about.
Did you not even ask yourself?
No. I suppose if I'm being brutally honest, there was always something in my head from the age of about 6, 7 that I felt different. And when I did eventually get married, it was probably because I was conforming to what everybody expected. And I thought this is what life, at 26 years of age, this is what life's all about. You get married, you settle down, you have kids, blah, 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 and everything's hunky-dory. But of course, a year or two into the marriage, and it wasn't that long, it might have been 3 years or maybe not even that, I realised I had made a mistake. But there was nothing I could do about it at that stage. And look, I'm not the only one that's been in that situation. I've known over the years loads of other people who have got married and then realised that their sexuality or their gender didn't fit in that situation. And they then wished, to do something about it, and a lot of them can't do anything about it.
Well, can I put the, just don't want to labour this point, but you said there was nothing you could do about it. You were in the north. There was something you could do about it. You could get a divorce. When I got married, there was no divorce, and I, as I say, I was married for 5 years longer than I should have been because I had this dreadful guilt about that. You know, you made a mistake, but it was your fault. Put up with it. Fortunately, I was in a country that had divorce, so I got divorced. But did you not? Did you feel trapped, or did you feel trapped for very different reasons than perhaps I did?
Well, I felt trapped because I wasn't actually being able to be who I was, looking back on it. But at the time, the way it manifested itself was depression. There was a lot of depression in my life, and once I realised who I was, then that depression continued for a while until I actually became who I should not always have been. So that was the problem that I had, and I think the problem within the relationship came from the fact of that depression being ongoing.
Okay. Yeah. Emma, when I was covering this whole issue last year, when we had to have the naysayers on, and one of the things they kept saying, "Oh, this is going to redefine marriage. This is going to be, this is going to completely change marriage." And I felt like saying to them, "Yes, it is, and that's exactly what we're trying to do." But in many respects, we kept that one quiet. Did we feed them a con?
No, I mean, I've never been married, but I'm sure, you know,
But you can be now.
I can be now,
Yeah.
which is great. You know, I've never been married, but I'm looking at my best friend is getting married on the 1st of July, and they're a same-sex couple, they're male, and they're getting married on the 1st of July, and I'm looking at the reasons why they're getting married, and they're getting married because they've a firm belief in what this will actually mean for their relationship. And I mean, marriage is what each individual couple makes of it. It's not, you know, dictated by a church. It's not dictated by the state. A marriage, you know, people get married for various different reasons, but most of all, people get married because they want to actually have their relationship recognised in front of the people that they love, and they want to be with that person for the rest of their life. And there's a legal component to that as well. But no, we didn't feed anybody porkies. I think the polar opposite. I think anything within the movement that was trying to be advocated for was scrutinised within an inch of its existence, because we thought it was a divisive issue, but it wasn't as divisive as we thought when the boxes were opened. But I mean, knocking on doors and being able to go and advocate for something that you believe in, and this movement gave you kind of a feeling of what people's fears, but also, you know, the positivity within it as well, and what it actually might mean for people. So I don't think we've fed anybody porcupines.
But what we're seeing, Max, over the last, I just looked at some stats. I think there were 376 civil partnerships last year. There were 392 the year before. This year we've had 418 same-sex marriages. It doesn't suggest that there was this massive, shall we say, underlying desire to get married per se. I mean, the increases are...
I've never bought that argument ad numerum, that it has to be about the volume of people, there has to be... Because if that was the case, then what argument would you make for recognising trans people's right to identify with the gender that they live? The volume is, for me, more important in the sense that every marriage that takes place, you have to postulate an average number of guests who attend it, an average amount of caterers or venues that host it, and the cultural change that you will see percolating throughout society is a function of that as well. I'm just to revisit the point about redefining marriage, and you saying we did redefine it when we were a bit, you know, deceptive. No, I mean, when asked about it, people saying you're redefining marriage, that's sort of an argument imported from America. My answer is yes. Yes, we are redefining marriage, and isn't it a good thing that we are? And haven't we been redefining marriage all the way along? Was it not the case that women were considered with the possessions of a husband? Was it not the case that a married woman was not eligible to work in the civil service? We have been redefining marriage for the better, consistently, including with the divorce referendum, for quite some time. And so I'm all in favour of redefinitions that empower people. And I think that your description, Emma, of marriage is where we are and where we're going, but not where we've come from. Marriages are now about two people consensually self-determining and defining their relationship within ceremonies that very often they write. I've officiated at two weddings, both opposite-sex couples, but both couples didn't want any religious involvement in their marriage whatsoever, and they wrote their own vows, and they were spellbindingly beautiful because they were about them and their relationship with all of the people who came to witness their wedding. It wasn't about invoking Bronze Age blood myths or involving some sort of bureaucracy that, in my view, just parasitises society and the rituals that we need to sustain us in our relationships.
Okay, I'm going to come to you then, Louise, because both of us take lots of photographs, and image means something to me. And my defining image of that particular day, although I've got thousands of images, is one I took in Ballsbridge Hotel, and it's of Helen and Philippa Ryder, and it's the two of them embracing. And that to me was the defining image, because the trans community to me was the ones who really were significantly impacted and got a gain out of it. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I mean the trans community did, because the requirement to be single up to that point had been one of the big stumbling blocks for trans couples who were in relationship and married. It was a good thing, and the two came together quite easily with the Gender Recognition Act, following on from that. But I think, particularly around the marriage equality campaign, there was a lot of, we'll keep the trans people out of this. They're going to mess things up. We'll keep them out of it. And I felt quite hurt about that, because at the end of the day, those trans people and all the trans people that I know in a marriage situation had to have had a very, very definite what would you call it, reason to want the marriage equality referendum to pass. So I felt very aggrieved that the trans community were basically just sidelined out of it, for whatever reason.
Well, no, that was a conscious policy decision on behalf of Yes Equality. I mean, I was approached by Gráinne Healy in February, where she put the question to me directly about whether I would mention trans issues during the marriage equality debate. And I said, well, I'm not planning to go out and grandstand on trans issues when I'm doing public advocacy, but I can see certain arenas and situations where it would be, first of all, the ethical thing to do, and deeply advantageous as well, because of this requirement for trans people to be single to avail of gender recognition. Is it not a good question to put to opponents of marriage equality to say to them, well then I assume, as an opponent of marriage equality, because you're in favour of keeping biological families intact, that you therefore oppose the requirement for trans people to be single to avail of gender recognition, and put the onus of them, put the contradiction on them. But it didn't satisfy her at all, and the Yes Equality movement made it quite clear that they did not wish trans issues to arise at all during the discussion of marriage equality. And I thought that wasn't merely just doctrinaire and marginalising an already marginalised constituency within LGBT. I thought it was tactically stupid to overlook the opportunities. Well, that's why when Noise had our initiatives, you'll notice that trans people we shared our platform. They were at our rally for marriage and spoke with enormous eloquence from the stage. And it wasn't the entire, well, we can say it was the Yes Equality leadership who made that decision, but they couldn't enforce it on the likes of LGBT Noise or others who refused to be censored.
Yeah. Emma, coming back to yourself, because you're the only one here that really is in the, what I would call the active political arena, although Louise is. How do you think the political, shall we say, for want of a better term, the political class approached all of this when it started out? Because we were there at Dublin Castle, and I've got the footage, and you see them all, and you'd swear it was their idea. Fianna Fáil came in for a bit of criticism because they were less active. Now, I know there were a lot of people in Fianna Fáil did.
Perception.
There was a perception. But in my recollection, the only ones who really grasped it from day one with the Labour Party, Fine Gael were lukewarm until it got to a certain point. How did the political arena respond to it or react to it when it came on?
I disagree with you, and I would say that the Labour Party were, the only one fully involved from the start. I don't agree with that comment in any way, shape, or form. I was in Woodkey with members of the Fianna Fáil party, but in January, when everybody was brought together to try and see how we could make this a national movement. I think behind the scenes that there was support from political parties right across the board for the movement, and it was support behind the scenes that really didn't actually come to the forefront. I mean, from our perspective, we were a parliamentary party of 20 with no Dublin representatives, bar 2 senators. One north of the Liffey, 3 senators, 2 north of the Liffey, 1 south of the Liffey in Dublin. And, for us, it was very much about pushing the movement within our own members and our own membership. At the day of the referendum, if Fianna Fáil weren't completely involved, Micheál Martin left a voice message for every single signed up member, all 20,000 of them, left them a voicemail on the day of the referendum advocating for a yes vote. Our TDs went from county to county, and knocking on doors, going to members and actually advocating for members and answering members' questions. I mean, what we tried to do was actually make it real for our members and tell your kind of stories. But I mean, I think I will be non-partisan in this and say that political parties right across the board, and every single political party from Labour to Fine Gael to Sinn Féin to the newer movements, each of them advocated in their own way, and it wasn't supposed to be about one political party or any political party, and we agreed to get on board with yes equality, and that's what they asked us to do.
We're going to have to finish off quickly here, but Max, I'm going to give just bring yourself and Louise in on the last word. What do you think has been the significant development in the last 12 months? Since we've passed the referendum?
I suppose that the impact that I see most clearly is the taboos are no longer, people see through them. That while yes, gay couples, lesbian couples and trans people are still mindful of their personal safety and security, and they it's going to be a long time before people let their guards down fully. But young couples now hold hands in public. They'll kiss in public, not always without in a problem-free. I've had friends shouted at and scorned in public. But I think that we now know that the bullies aren't in the majority. We now know that the homophobes do not command the room. That the majority of Irish people have spoken overwhelmingly, and the direction is positive and it's forward.
Last word with yourself, Louise.
In the last year, I think it's been good. It's been positive. I think the negative side has been that, just talking about what Max was saying there, we have raised a lot of hackles within the homophobes, and they are becoming much more sensitive and much more, I suppose, desperate, if you want. Even walking up George Street the other night, 2 girls had a go at me. So, and that's the first time that's ever happened in my entire life. So this sort of thing that is happening, but sure, it's good otherwise.
Okay, I interviewed Kinky Friedman about 8 years ago, and he was running for Texas governor. One of his stands was he supported same-sex marriage, and I said, why do you do that? And he said, gay people have the right to be as miserable as everybody else. So I'm going to leave it on that note. I want to thank Cllr for doing such a fabulous job. I want to thank our guests Emma Murphy, Louise Hannon and Max Kryzanowski. Bernard Whelan's coming up at Dublin Edition. I'm Mick Fitz and I'll be back in a week's time. No, Louise will be back in a week's time. You take care.
That I want to have a little pride in, my world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am.